Hello, so welcome to the next lecture. It's about the Rococo. And in this one, normally when I do in the class, I have the students compare these two images. So I do it yourself, and you can kind of get an idea of what's going on that changes in this new style, which is sometimes called the late Baroque, but we're going to call it the Rococo. So we'll get started. The Rococo, again, it sometimes is called the late Baroque. And there was influences by Rubens and Poussin. So they both have completely different styles. And Rubens is more of a painterly, painting with color, like we talked about earlier, instead of line. And Poussin is more about painting with line. So the types of images you see are smaller and more intimate than the Baroque, and that's partially because we don't have elites. This is more like just still people that are well off, especially new rich type of people, but not elites. So they have different interests. They live in what are called hotels, and these are these townhouses in the Paris center of Rococo, just like modern day Paris or New York or Tokyo in Japan or something like that. Even a small place is very expensive. So the types of art that's going in here, these are important artists. They cost a lot of money, but we're seeing things that are small. And because the types of subjects are not for elite people, they're just types of things that just well-off people are interested in. So fantasy, eroticism, escapism, family, and love. So what you would see in like a typical television show. So racaille means rubble, and coquillage means shells. So it talks about the types of decorations that these people would do in their fancy Parisian apartments. So no rules. And part of the reason why is because they're not elites. They don't have a tradition. A lot of them are new rich. During this time, we see two different types of artists, the Poisinistas, who are more into drawing, line, having things that are more like what we saw in, say, the Renaissance, and then the Rubenistas, who like color. And these types of paintings, they tend to appeal to everyone, and this style becomes more prominent than the Poisinista style, but Poisinistas will come back in the 19th century. So this is Poisson's Burial of Phocion. So it's kind of like what we saw with Titian, but minus the painterliness. Just everything is just so, we have this perfect sense of space, but everything is very precise lines. So none of the drama or anything that we would see in Caravaggio and in the people that are influenced by him. And then on the other hand, we have Rubens, who we looked at before. Lots of color. It's fluffy almost. So these two different styles are what's prominent during the Rococo. So first we'll talk about a Poisinista, which is Jean-Antoine Watteau. And this one's called Lindiferant, and it's easy to translate into French. It means the indifferent. So oftentimes I ask the class what they think about this guy, and they say, well, he's fancy. He's got some interesting clothes. He's kind of light. So he seems to be dancing, but he's also very confident and open. And you see the painting is tiny, but we have an emphasis on his clothes and his makeup and all of those things that give him some personality. So it's not about like heavyweight subjects like we had seen before. There isn't a lesson to be learned here. It's just trying to show beautiful things and who are considered to be beautiful people at the time doing these beautiful things. So this is probably his Magnus Opus, the one that if you were to pick one painting to show of his, you would, Pilgrimage to Cythera. So it is kind of like they're making it a mythological subject, but it's just showing the regular kind of like French rich going about their business, which seems to be pretty easy, leisurely lifestyle. We have their little toy dogs who were expensive at the time, their fancy clothes. And then like what Rubens would do, we have a bunch of Pudi and angels following them. And it's almost like a dance. Remember, Leonardo had talked about gestures. In this one, it's more about how the body is arranged, just like what we saw with Lindiferant. So you get in the details. theater and life. So in other words, the people that are in these types of roles, whether they're royalty or the rich, they're kind of acting at all times. They have to fulfill a role, and there's never a time where they can let go. So it's showing them in an island of love, slim grace. This type of painting, believe it or not, becomes popular. It's called a fête galante, which means amorous festival. And it was submitted to the Salon. I'll talk about the Salon a little bit later on when we get to later styles. And this is a new category created for Watteau. So he's pretty influential on the academic artists of the time. You get in close again, we see that idea that Leonardo, you express things through gesture, but they're not expressing anything important per se. It's just kind of light things. So the haze of color, the subtly modeled shapes, the gliding motion, the air of suave gentility appeal greatly to Rococo artists' wealthy patrons. So basically, they want to show their life and they want to show how great it is, and they want to look at that. But some of them are a little bit more serious. This is Gil and 4 other characters from Commedia del Art. Commedia del Art was a type of theater form that appealed pretty much to everybody. Regular working class folks could go and see it, and then sometimes elites and wealthy folks would go and see it as well. But the king thought that it wasn't the best influence on people, so he banned it in Paris from 1697 to 1716. Since I'm recording this during the pandemic, you can kind of understand like how the pandemic has affected musicians, artists, people that work in restaurants. It's made it so that they can't have a job. So he painted this for his friend who was out of a job, an actor who now owned a cafe, and he's kind of the sad clown. And we see all the other figures who are, kind of like some are laughing at him, but some are concerned. So he's kind of talking about how life has changed now that they don't have this theater show anymore. So Watteau dies at 37, but believe it or not, his influence, just everyone and who's making paintings for wealthy people in France wants to do his style. And Boucher is probably the one who took it the furthest. This one is a toilet of Venus. And even though it's about Venus, which could technically be a kind of important subject, it isn't really, it just, toilet just means toilet. So it's the toilet of Venus. It just means the place where you get ready. It doesn't mean the toilet where you go to the bathroom. So it's where you put on your makeup and clothes and whatever scents or whatever you're wearing. So we just have Venus and she's just getting pretty, getting smelling good, all that kind of stuff. And we see it in the scene similar to what Watteau had, with all this like beautiful green stuff everywhere and clouds and just surrounded by wealthy things. So it was for the Madame de Pompadour. She's pictured here, who is Louis XV's mistress. So a lot of these mistress pictures is something that comes up, and it's for his private retreat. So French elites, they tended to have both men and women had got married for business or political reasons. So they would always have side people, girlfriends or boyfriends, sometimes both. And again, just showing everything as being beautiful, light, and easy. Everybody's young, everybody's youthful. And he's fond of showing things as if they're taking place in this like perfume garden, is often how people describe it, covered with flowers. These fleshy bodies are kind of similar to what Rubens was doing. This is all Rubens' influence, just youth and rosiness and color, big paint strokes. So when you get in close, you see all of those details. Very Rubens-like faces, right? This one, though, is telling kind of a dirty joke because the French love dirty jokes. And this is Fragonard. And he was a student of Boucher, which you probably could tell right away with this beautiful perfume garden. There's a little story going on here. The man on the left, who's pictured here, he is the patron. So he's the person who hired Fragonard to do this picture. This guy over here is a priest, but also the lover of this woman, very young woman right here. And he doesn't know about him. So what's probably going on, as you can tell by the look on her face, is that this is the guy she likes. And that's the guy, the old guy that probably gives her things that she needs. So they kind of make it a dirty joke. So the hat represents male sexuality, which he holds out, pointing right at her vulva, which is the shape made by the dress. And then she's kicking off her shoe, which represents losing her virginity, but it's also placed as if she was having her first orgasm. So if you see the shape as a vulva, it would be like the clitoris. So kind of a dirty joke, but he likes that. And still in this perfume garden, everything is beautifully done, despite it just being a very, very sophisticated dirty joke. Maybe not even sophisticated. So as Fragonard got older, like a lot of people when they get older, they get married and they start having kids. There's a lot less erotic subtext. So this one, The Blind Man's Bluff, which you can see in the Toledo Museum of Art, also great examples at the DIA if you're listening to this in one of my Detroit schools. There was a companion piece for this, The Seesaw. So he basically did series of kids playing games, but still in these perfume gardens, still everything beautiful and rosy. On the other side, you have people that are influenced by Vermeer and by Poussin, but also Rousseau, who's a philosopher, not a painter. And Rousseau had this idea that there's a natural man, and they mean humans in general, uncorrupted by nature. And he believed that new systems like capitalism, which they didn't even have a word for at the time, but everybody knew what it was, and power structures were basically taking people away from what they would do otherwise and what they had done since time immemorial. Uh, so his idea is all of our natural inclinations are right. So a Rousseau person basically thinks people are fundamentally good. But some people read this and they kind of perverted what Rousseau had to say, and they said, yeah, natural inclinations, that's the society we're setting up now. And people who are working class and slave away for us, and us would be the boss who's patronizing this painting, they belong there. It's just natural. So they call these paintings that are about everyday life stuff genre paintings. And that's basically saying it's not about a religious subject, it's not a portrait, it's not a still life. So his paintings act as moral lessons, affirming the rightness of the existing social order and its values. So kind of like what we saw earlier with those halls, and they're kind of judging people for partying. In this one, they're saying, instead of judging people, they're saying, yes, the working class who do all this stuff for us for very little money, they belong there, and they're also majestic. So we see that here. You can kind of compare it to Vermeer, but Vermeer had different meanings and different subjects, but the same thing, we're using kind of natural light, and everything is kind of like peaceful and beautiful. It's less frivolous than the early Rococo. I think you can see that. We don't see any perfume gardens or putis. So you can compare it to Vermeer, a similar use of light, but not quite as subtle as what Vermeer was doing with light. So we finally get to our second feminine artist. When we get towards the end of the class, it's going to be mostly women. And that's Mary Louise Elizabeth Vigée Lebrun. And what she's trying to portray in this picture is naturalism. And I put it in quotes because it's a very kind of practiced naturalism. So oftentimes you'll hear this, like, it's kind of almost like a meme in a way. Men who tend to just say what's on their mind, they'll see some woman on Instagram or something, and they'll see her and it's like, I love the way she doesn't wear any makeup, and she just looks like, very natural. Of course, the woman that's in the picture is wearing makeup, but she's wearing makeup to look like she's not wearing makeup. And her hair, which looks tousled just so, is tousled in a way that took her a lot of time. And, she probably works out and does all of these things. So that's why I put the quotes for the naturalism. It's natural as in it's a practiced type of set of behaviors and way of looking, made to look natural. But she's also showing her self-reliance and confidence. So unlike the female artists before this, whenever they got married and had kids, they're expected to give all that up, in Europe at least, not in other places. But Vigée Lebrun refused to do that. She had children, and she did something that people hadn't really done before. We saw a little bit with Fragonard, but she did it with a little bit more weight. showing children and mothers and the relationship between the two. So here she's showing herself as very confident. She looks right at us. She's at work. It shows what she does and what she's planning on continuing to do. But again, like we saw Fragonard and Boucher and everybody, this kind of youthful face, and that's part of the so-called naturalism of this time. So in this one, self-portrait with a daughter, she's doing something very tricky here. She's making her daughter and herself dressed in ancient Roman clothes. And how we're supposed to read that is it says, this is timeless. So if you set something in a time that happened a long time ago, you're saying this is something that goes on forever. It's timeless. So she had a child and remained an artist. Part of the reason why she was able to do that is because Marie Antoinette was fond of her. But it was also the kind of first move for feminine artists to be able to work throughout their lives. So these family types of pictures where it's not lightweight like what Fragonard did, but something more heavyweight and kind of universal, like's going on here, is new to the Rococo. So she invents this type of style. And we'll kind of see when we look at neoclassicism that her style works with neoclassicism as well. So Marie Antoinette was quite fond of Vigée Lebrun, probably because Marie Antoinette supposedly wasn't super attractive in real life, but Vigée Lebrun managed to be able to show Marie Antoinette as she was, but also attractive. So Marie Antoinette would see this and say, "That looks like me," but it would also be kind of the best possible version of her. So Marie Antoinette, her child dies as an infant, and that's actually what supposedly this painting is about. We see the empty crib with the black cloak on it, and one of her other children is pointing towards it. But I think most people, when they first look at this picture, they see Marie Antoinette with her giant dress and her red, and her daughter looking at her as the main focus. So just like we saw Velasquez, if you're working for someone really important, they want to know that they're important in every picture. So we'll talk about the French Revolution later on, but caused this woman to lose her head and her husband as well. Vigée Lebrun was banned from the French Academy, but she was able to still make a living making portraits for former elites. So pictures like this in England are kind of like what we see with the earlier paintings, like the Vanitas paintings. It's showing people who are doing things the wrong way. So this one's called The Orgy from Hogarth. It's from a set of plays by Richard Steele. It's a great name. And it's part of a set. And it's about the female character's fall from grace. There's also a male character who is a rogue, as they say, like a kind of awful man. We see the female character, and she's shown here in states of undress, and the black marks are supposed to show that she had contracted syphilis. So it's basically telling us that this man and this woman, they went the wrong way, and be careful. It's kind of like the 17th century equivalent of an after-school special, these TV shows that used to tell us not to do drugs or drink or anything like that when I was a kid. So a lot of people would see this. If they had visited the Rose Tavern, they would know what they're looking at, which would be ironic because a lot of the patrons would visit this, the men, but at the same time, they would judge the people who are working there. So again, this kind of like the working class, they can't be trusted to take care of their own lives, but at the same time, we're going to take advantage of their services. So this one is the breakfast scene from Marriage a la Mode. So a lot of new rich people, they try to like expand their business by basically marrying their kids to someone else who has a business so they can make friends. So this is a financial marriage. And as you might imagine, the kids were like, whatever. They would get from their parents like money to get a house, get everything together. In theory, eventually, like when the previous generation dies, they would be able to expand the business. But that didn't always happen because you're basically giving kids a lot of money. And in this one, it's supposed to show that they partied it away. So we have the woman, she's just yawning. It's early in the morning. And then the man, same thing. And you can see how everything's in disarray. These are like the the accountants and financial officers that their parents hired, and they're freaking out about all these unpaid bills. And then if we kind of look closely on this dude, we can see he has a black mark, again, showing he has syphilis. This is a print version. It's backwards because when you print things, it shows up backwards. And it's kind of cool. And this one, it's easier to see the dog is like looking at something in the guy's pocket. And it's a woman's hat and not his wife's. So as you might imagine, he's getting around and the wife is doing the same thing. Part of what this is trying to show is that a lot of these people with money, they have too much money and not enough taste. So they just arrange all of the art they can do in this just haphazard way. It's kind of making fun of the Rococo in a way. This one, I'll include this link in the description for the video. But he's kind of making fun of artists that don't do things right, but in a very clever way. So you can kind of check that out and then check out some of the problems, satire and false perspective with this one. So moving to England, this is Thomas Gainsborough. And he's really trying to show this naturalism like we saw with Vijay Lebrun. It's the same idea. It's like, to look like this, you actually have to work pretty hard, but you're supposed to look like it's easy. So we see that with this woman with the clothes that are different than what you would see in France, where it was very like tight and fancy. This is still pretty fancy, but it's kind of loose and flowing. Her hair is loose and flowing. She's still wearing makeup, but it's not quite as extreme. Gainsborough originally wanted to put sheep in here, but he died before it was complete, and the sheep would just add to that pastoral scene, the idea of this idyllic place we've been looking at going back all the way to Titian. So we get in close, we can see it's painterly, so he's a Rubenista. This one is a bit more interesting. Mrs. Siddons, and it shows her this actress. It shows her in her best clothes and in a portrait, and we can kind of see like a stronger face. So not necessarily trying to show the naturalism, trying to show a woman who is really dressed up and what she can do with herself. Here's a drawing of it. And you can compare it to this other picture, which is a little darker, and it's showing Siddons doing what she does. She was an actress, so it shows these kind of figures behind that represent tragic figures from Greece, and we can see that she's kind of posing. She's spread out. She's the focus. So it's not just, we can imagine this is part of some kind of dramatic scene where something horrible would happen, and she's contemplating what to do next. So you can compare it to the portrait where it's just kind of showing her as she is, certainly showing her as confident, but this one showing her working. So we'll kind of see these types of themes where people are actually doing their work a little bit more often. And I show you these ones, Piranesi, just because they're very strange and they kind of prefigure Romanticism, which is the next style we'll look at after Neoclassicism. So sometimes people call these pictures architectural surrealism. He made a series of drawings in prisons, and prisons were kind of a new thing at this time. Believe it or not, before the 18th century in the West, that imprisoning people wasn't really a thing. They might execute people or they might punish them in some way, but imprisonment wasn't a thing. And especially now, imprisonment is a much different thing than it had been in the past. So it kind of reflects stage plays where they tried to make stage plays of these very creepy areas, but he's also making a comment about how these new prisons are kind of horrific. So it represents a Gothic with a K taste, meaning people at this time started to look back to the Gothic period of where we kind of started the class and say, this is kind of dark and emotional. And that's why it represents early Romanticism. Romanticism doesn't refer to romantic as in you think of like, some kind of love relationship between two people. Instead, it just means emotional. So these are very cool to look at. And they call it architectural surrealism because it's a little more extreme than a place actually would have looked like in real life. But it does emphasize the kind of dankness and loneliness of these early prisons. And again, they seem to get more and more complex. Kind of reminds me of one of the Harry Potter movies.